December 7th, 1847 in Caton, New York, located approximately 150 miles west of Cooperstown, the home of the Hall of Fame. He started his professional baseball career in 1871. He played for 29 years as a barehanded catcher and ended his remarkable career in 1890. Jim White was extremely talented, an excellent athlete, and a great ball player. He was nicknamed the Deacon because of his religious convictions. He was also a man of integrity. Long before Curt Flood challenged the modern-day baseball owners by establishing free agency, Deacon White spoke up for his fellow ball players, addressing inadequate compensation and working conditions. He was a true pioneer in many ways, on the field and off the field. Deacon died on July 7, 1939 at the Watkins Summer Cottage along the Fox River, I believe just up near St. Charles, just a day before he was to be honored, or be the honored guest at a celebration taking place here in Aurora, recognizing baseball and his contribution to the game. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Aurora University, the City of Aurora, and the Aurora Historical Society, we welcome you to this honorary street dedication in the memory of James Deacon White. Please join me in giving a rounding applause for the family of Deacon White. If you could please stand up. This past July, 74 years after his passing, Deacon was elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Many changes in baseball have taken place since Deacon played. The one thing that hasn't changed is that the team that scores the most runs win the game. By the way of introduction, my name is Chuck Nelson. I'm an Assistant Chief of Staff to Mayor Tom Weisner, who you will hear from later today. I would like Reverend Kelvin Jockson to please come up for our invocation.
We share together in the spirit of prayer. Indeed, O God, our Father, we have come together with a spirit of celebration here this afternoon. Indeed, we celebrate the memory of Deacon White, not only as a baseball player, but as a man of character and deep faith. We celebrate the communities that have brought us together. We celebrate the Historical Society, the community of Aurora and Aurora University, and all of the efforts that have made this day possible. We celebrate each person that is gathered here, and especially these members of the baseball team. We recognize, oh God, as we share in this celebration, how important baseball is in our lives, as it has become a beacon between the generations, and that as it has reminded us in so many ways that indeed this gift of life that you have shared with us is a gift to be celebrated. And so we continue to celebrate, recognizing as we honor the past, that it is the past that brings us into the future. And so may we maintain in our own personal lives a reflection of the character that Deacon White displayed in his life, giving honor to you in all that we do. And we raise this our prayer in thy holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. And if we could give Reverend Kelvin Jockson and the Spartan baseball team a big hand. We have a number of special guests that are with us today. Dr. Rebecca Sherrick, President of Aurora University. Dr. Sherrick, thank you very much. I also understand Ron Hem is here. Ron, are you still here? Ron, President or Chairman of the Board. Ron, thank you very much. Mayor Tom Weisner is here. Here, thank you. Alderman Bill Donnell, 4th Ward Alderman, is here. In addition, representing the Aurora Historical Society is Executive Director John Jarros. I don't know if John made it out here yet or not. There he is. John, thank you. And Board President Mary Clark Orman. I'd like to recognize those who made this day possible, serving on the committee to recognize Deacon White. Mary Clark Orman, Paul Slugger Nelson, who's the manager of the Aurora Town team, Dee Basili, Steve McFarland from Aurora University, Jim Hamad from Aurora University, Sarah Russi from Aurora University, Roald Haase from the Aurora Historical Society, Dan Barrero from the City of Aurora, and Bill Pfeiffer, who's managing the Aurora veteran team or legend team up at the baseball field. Our first speaker today is 4th Ward Alderman Bill Donnell. Bill?
I want to welcome you all, especially the family of James Deacon White, to the 4th Ward and to the city of Aurora on this beautiful day. It's nice that we're right in view of his home, where he came here to be with Aurora University. I want to say that I am new to the ward, but I've been here for 30 years, and I'm very proud of Aurora University and the students that make this a great town. And again, just thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful day, and enjoy the ceremony.
Thank you very much, Bill. We're going to make a slight adjustment here to our agenda. We're going to ask Roald Haase to come up right now and say a few words on behalf of the Aurora Historical Society. Roald?
Hello and welcome. Deacon White was many things. He was a farmer, a printer, a smelter, optical shop worker, entrepreneur, and star catcher at the very birth of Major League Baseball. But most of all, Deacon White was a man of God, faithfully reading his Bible and following its guidance in his daily life. These moral precepts he imparted to his descendants, many of them who are here today. And even though his name had long been buried in the midst of baseball antiquity, Deacon White finally was ushered 2 months ago into the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. As we dedicate this street in Deacon White's name, we remember that he also was a man of Aurora. Living right here at 221 South Calumet Avenue, just a couple doors up that way, Deacon White would see his daughter Grace and her husband Roger Watkins launch a successful enterprise that resulted in the creation of Strathmore Company, a significant publisher and producer of such venerable children's games as the Magic Slate. Himself a one-time worker at Mendota College, the predecessor of Aurora College, Deacon would live to see his son-in-law, Roger Watkins, become a trustee of the college located just steps from here that is today known as Aurora University. To Grace and Roger would be born the Deacon's 4 grandchildren, Betty Jockson, Miriam Trumbo, Dan Watkins, and James Watkins. Of these, Betty Jockson is the only surviving Deacon White grandchild, and she is here today with us from California with one of her sons, the Reverend Calvin Jockson. These grandchildren, in turn, would rear families of their own, each representing a tie to Aurora University and engaging successive generations in respect for and attachment to the college. Miriam Trumbo's own husband, Mark Trumbo, was a longtime dean of the college. This Sunday, you already may have met many of these family successors, who include great-grandson Jerry Watkins of Wheaton, who just spoke at the Perry Theater. For most of the 1920s and 30s, Deacon White lived here in the home of Roger and Grace. In the 1920s, Deacon worked at Strathmore and its predecessor company in downtown Aurora, while already in his 70s. Finally, in the 1930s, he got to enjoy retirement in its total, he got to enjoy his retirement here in the community in which he chose to live out his life. It was a fulfilling life and included visits from such old friends as famed evangelist Billy Sunday, a one-time teammate in Major League Baseball who came to town with his revival meetings and once umpired games at the campus. It was a long road for the man from tiny Caton, New York, who learned baseball from a Civil War veteran and then adopted the sport as his lifetime vocation. He played 20 years in the major leagues and won accolades from the press of that time. Modern baseball scholars have deemed Deacon the finest catcher of the no mitt, no mask, no chest protector decade of the 1870s. Long after his playing days ended, Deacon White moved to Mendota with his first wife, Miriam, in 1909 to join his daughter Grace and husband Roger Watkins. There, both Deacon and Miriam worked for the college. Later, Roger and Grace moved to Aurora. Deacon would settle down with them in the big brick house you see before you today. Betty Jockson told me how Deacon would sit out on the porch, occasionally listening to Major League Baseball on the radio, and most often studying his Bible. Sometimes he'd watch the neighborhood kids play ball. Betty said Deacon was preparing to meet his maker, who he thought would return to earth sometime before his own death. Deacon White died in 1939, the same summer that the first of the inductees in the Hall of Fame were celebrated in Cooperstown. He may have been disappointed in not reaching the hall himself, but succeeding generations of his family wouldn't be. Deacon just made it in the Hall of Fame 2 months ago, a place he most rightfully belongs. And now Aurora has permanently memorialized this baseball great, James Deacon White Way. Thank you all today for celebrating our longtime neighbor and his family. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roald. Our next speaker is the great-grandson of Deacon White, Jerry Watkins. Jerry?
In 1936, the sports writer, or the sports editor of the Aurora Beacon News, wrote a poem called When Jim White Played. This was just 3 years before the founding of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and just 3 years before James White would die. I'm going to read the poem. It's called When Jim White Played. The baseball cranks all sneer at me and poke a lot of fun because I tell of plays they made in the days of '71. And yet, who cares for fun and sneers? By gum, I know I'm right. Somehow the game ain't played the same as 'twas by old Jim White. They talk about their great LaJoy and Wagner and McVie. To hear 'em yarn, you'd think, by darn, no one else could play. And yet I often call to mind those scenes of wild delight when across the fence some hit immense was smashed by old Jim White. And lordy, how old Jim could catch. He'd stand and dodge the bat. Without mask or mitt, it took some grit to catch great speed like that. He'd nail 'em high and scoop 'em low, it was a thrilling sight. No player dared, he'd be too scared to catch like old Jim White. So when you sing of modern stars, don't call the old and slow. They knew the game and played it too some 50 years ago. And while of course the players now are men of grit and might, somehow the game ain't played the same as 'twas by old Jim White.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Our next and final speaker is the Honorable Mayor Thomas J. Weisner. Mayor?
Thank you, Betty Jockson, and the entire family for being here and represented so well on this great day as we honor James Deacon White. I would also like to thank AU and Dr. Becky Sherrick for doing such a wonderful and gracious job of a brunch this morning that I hear was absolutely wonderful. And I don't miss very many brunches, and I feel terrible that I miss this one, but I hear it was really great. I want to talk, if I could just for a minute, about two Aurora traditions. The first of which is Aurora's baseball tradition. The young men here probably may or may not relate to some of these names and stories, but we had the honor of having Casey Stengel actually play and out of Aurora in his younger days, and of course we know he went on to manage the New York Yankees to several pennants and World Series victories. A little variation on the baseball theme, Stevens Adamson Company sponsored a softball, fast-pitch softball team in Aurora for several years, a decade or two, and Harvey Sturkle was their ace pitcher, and that team won several fast pitch world championships themselves. So we have that tradition, but we do know today that the brightest star in Aurora's baseball constellation is James Deacon White. What a record, what a phenomenal record, and that poem was absolutely wonderful and evocative of the day and how tough things were back then. And how well he did. So we are here to honor him, and I do want to, if I could, I do have a proclamation that will enumerate a number of his accomplishments, so I won't say those now, we'll incorporate them then, but I want to read a letter from the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago White Stockings evolved into the Chicago Cubs, to Mary Orman, the head of our historical society. I thought you would enjoy this. It says, Dear Mary, it's my great pleasure to read about your upcoming celebration for Deacon White. Deacon was an amazing ball player, from catching the first official pitch and recording the first hit in professional baseball to helping the White Stockings win their first pennant. He has left an indelible mark on the game of baseball. His enshrinement in the Hall of Fame this summer will enable fans in future generations to learn of and admire his contributions. On behalf of the Ricketts family, as well as the entire Chicago Cub organization, I would like to thank the City of Aurora for setting aside a day to honor one of the former greats in Major League Baseball. The love of the game is furthered through actions like this. And this brings me to our second tradition that I wanted to talk about, and that is we have named a very limited number of streets in our community after famous Aurorans who have done well and done us proud. And we're very happy to be able to do that today. I am going to read a proclamation, and perhaps it would be time a great time for those who are going to be involved in the unveiling here to step forward and organize, if you will. And I'll be reading this during that time.
You can have the family members please step up front. Dr. Sherrick, if you would join us too as well, please.
Whereas James Deacon White gained the first hit in organized professional baseball with the Cleveland Forest Cities in the National Association on May 4th, 1871. And whereas Deacon White played 20 years consecutively in Major League Baseball with teams in 7 cities and 3 leagues, the National Association, the National League, and the Players League. And whereas Deacon White has been described by modern baseball scholars as the finest catcher of the decade of the 1870s, catching more games that decade than any other catcher, much of that time barehanded without a mask or chest protector. And whereas Deacon White was the catcher on 5 consecutive pennant-winning teams from 1873 through 1877, he established a career batting average of .312 over 20 years and led the National League in 8 offensive categories in 1877, including hits, RBIs, batting average, and slugging percentage. And whereas Deacon White's amazing career was finally recognized when he was enshrined in Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York on July 28th of this year, and whereas Deacon White maintained a 30-year relationship with Aurora College and its predecessor, Mendota College, ultimately living as a close neighbor at 221 South Calumet Avenue from 1922 until his death in 1939. And whereas Deacon White's son-in-law, Roger Watkins, was a longtime trustee of Aurora College, and his granddaughter, Miriam Trumbo, was married to longtime college dean Mark Trumbo. Now, therefore, I, Thomas J. Weisner, Mayor of the City of Aurora, on behalf of the City Council, ask all citizens in Aurora to join me in celebrating James Deacon White's elevation to the Hall of Fame and his long association with Aurora, Illinois, by designating the 200 block of South Calumet Avenue as James Deacon White Way as of September 29, 2013. Thank you to the family and congratulations.
Okay, baseball fans, it's that time. Is the family ready? Ready. Please unveil the sign. You want a countdown?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.